From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know.
Take a second, if you're in a safe place and not driving, and look around, just your immediate area. Don't think outside of your room. Just the stuff you can see or the stuff you can touch. Try counting how many things you can identify as being made of plastic. Just take a second and think about it.
Yeah, man, just on my desk right here, I've got this tiny little plastic gummy bear that my kid uses to make, camera's there, to make necklaces. So there's one. I got a McDonald's cup. I've got a bunch of little trinkets. I've got a little plastic squirrel with a beanie. I like this guy. Hey, is the camera focusing on his cute little squirrel face? Yeah. I'm really bad at centering on this because it's off to the side. Got a bunch of, like a bottle of hand sanitizer, cords, I've got an Ethernet cord that's wrapped in rubber or with plastic ends on it at the very least. Yeah, man, a lot of stuff. This camera that we're recording into, these little Logitech cameras.
The keyboard we type on. I live with a life-size plastic skeleton because that's where I'm at in life.
Ben, don't spoil. I wanted to believe that Agent Scully was in fact a real skeleton.
I think it is. I think it is a huge injustice for us to say that the nature of her physical material decides whether or not she's real. But I'm very, I'm just like
That's
a pro be what you want kind of person.
Got it.
But you're right. And a lot of our fellow listeners just did the same thing. You see the objects on nearby counters, shelves, tables, right? And also think about the furniture. Think about the device you're using to play this episode. Think about the clothing you're wearing, right? What percentage of that is a synthetic polymer? The short answer is there are probably, for many of us in the audience today, there are more plastic things around you than you can easily count. Plastic is ubiquitous. Plastic is everywhere. So today's question, how did it get here? When did we know about it? And what does this mean for the future? To answer this, we do have to start at what may be kind of a boring place, but it's important for the rest of the episode. So here are the facts. Plastic.
A brief history of plastic. Yeah. Technically, plastic is it's like a catch-all term, sort of. It's a word or for a group of things for any material that can be shaped, molded, or manipulated into any form. Some of these things occur naturally. Some of these substances occur naturally, but most are man-made. And today, the word plastic is really used to refer to a category of materials that we collectively call polymers.
Just for an example, the stuff that's recycled is often not used in the ways you think it would be used. Like take a plastic milk jug. Mm-hmm. Done with your plastic milk jug. You wash it out because you don't want it to smell up your house or your trash bag. And then while you're doing that, you say, oh, wait, I recycled. So I'm going to put this in the blue, the blue receptacle. And then you think, okay, off on your journey, little plastic jug, bro. I wish you luck in this, your secular version of reincarnation. That plastic jug can only get recycled a few times because it degrades in quality every time it's recycled. So this means it can only be recycled a finite number of times. So what happened to the used plastic? Well, in the US, we did something that's very popular in a lot of disposal strategies of this country. We shipped it somewhere where we couldn't see it. You know what I mean?
Out of sight, out of mind, like a child. I can't see it. It's not there anymore. Yeah. And unfortunately, that is an all too common thing that we as Americans fall victim to. And to your point, Ben, like even like the idea, this is interesting to me, and this is maybe more a question that I have. If it can only be recycled a certain number of times, like how do you know when you're done? Like when you've no longer got a viable product? Isn't that something you have to track as well? Or
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, because then we have this whole logistic aspect to it, right? Logistical aspect to it, where we can't just do our best to recycle stuff. We also have to make sure that we're recycling something into something viable. The complications alone could cripple the entire project. So ship it off to China, right? For a long time, labor was cheaper there. Also, environmental laws were lax, right? Or at least on paper, the U.S. laws were more strict. The country of China and businesses in China eventually were no longer able to find uses for all of this discarded plastic. So now they've largely stopped accepting it. There's just not much of a market for this recycled stuff. And that means that a lot of the plastic in this country, in the US, ends up getting discarded, and it piles up. And I don't know about you. This gives me an existential crisis. There's a question I have to ask at the very end of this.
Yeah, and maybe you can answer this, Ben. I know, and I live in Decatur, Georgia, and the city of Decatur has been plagued with corruption in terms of overcharging people for utilities, and there was like a big lawsuit and all this stuff. But I've also heard rumor that my little blue recycling bin hopper that I, roll out onto the curb every Monday, that just ends up in the landfill more often than not. That a lot of municipalities don't do a good job of recycling, even when you think that's what you're doing.
Yeah, it's true. And that's something that is unfortunately not historically uncommon. You know what I mean? Like, consider a lot of office buildings where, people think they are throwing that aluminum can, that plastic bottle into the recycling bin. And then one night, maybe you're working late and you see that the people who do custodial services in that office just throw it all in the same place. And then maybe you tell yourself there's a magical Seussian sorting machine that handles everything.
Like a Harry Potter hat of some sort. You
right.
know?
Yeah, like Harry Potter trash hat. So that's where we're at. Since 1950, the world has created 6.3 trillion kilograms of plastic waste. 91% of that has never been recycled, even once. This trend is only going to accelerate as emerging economies increase their plastic consumption. Like, think about this. In 2018, advanced economies in the world were using 20 times more plastic than per capita than consumers in places like Indonesia or in India. And now people are on the way up, right? There's a higher demand for plastic. And the industry itself, big plastic, is counting on that growing demand to keep selling stuff. Even though a great deal of it will still be around probably long after everyone listening to this podcast or watching this YouTube clip today has been long dead. And this is that existential crisis. I wanted to ask you about this. Everyone, you, Doc, all of us listening along at home or in our cars or counting the pieces of plastic around us. Do you experience existential dread when you hold like a plastic fork and realize just how much longer it will be around than you, how much more permanent it is in the scheme of things than you, a living being? It bothers me.
Yeah, it bothers me too. And you know who else it bothers, Ben? Kids. Who, as you well know, kids these days, I say that as someone who's essentially becoming an old grandpapa, but kids these days are what the kids these days call pretty woke. They are hip to all these societal problems, political and environmental and otherwise. And you know what else kids like? Legos. And apparently a lot of kids who are fond of Legos begged the Lego Corporation in the form of letters that they wrote to the company to stop using single-use plastic bags in their packaging. So Lego heard them. The Lego Group Chief Executive Officer, Niels B. Christensen, said, "We have received many letters from children about the environment, asking us to remove single-use plastic packaging. We've been exploring alternatives for some time, and the passion and ideas from children inspired us to begin to make changes." So apparently they are looking to roll this out in the very near future, and it will be replaced with paper. Which, again, like we said earlier in the episode, is much more viable as a recyclable good for single-use materials. It's investing $400 million over 3 years to improve its sustainability efforts overall, the Lego Corporation. Unfortunately, Legos themselves made of plastic, but at least kids aren't throwing their Legos in the ocean, presumably. It's something you keep around and pass down to siblings. And, so I think that's fine.
Yeah. They're so expensive.
They are quite expensive.
You're a parent. You're aware of that.
I am aware of that. They're also murder on your bare feet,
right.
As every parent knows when you're walking around. Thankfully, my kid's more into bracelets than she is Legos, but that's plastic beads. But again, those are meant to be kept around and given to friends and hopefully not just chucked. But yeah, our super producer, Doc Holliday, off mic, just kind of during our ad break, exasperatedly exclaimed, "Oh, this is depressing," and you're not wrong, Doc. You're not wrong, but hopefully we can sort it out before we wreck the planet entirely. Not to sound too tree huggery about it, but sure feels like we're hitting a tipping point with all this stuff.